So thank you everyone who has joined us to the webinar hosted by the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity Program, AFSEE, on how to apply to the fellowship. I'm Dr. Armina Ishkanyan, and I'm joined here with colleagues. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we'll begin by some short introductions to the panelists and to the webinar. Then we will provide information on how, where, and when to apply, how you can strengthen your application. We'll talk you through our selection process and where you can get some help on that process. Then after the presentations, we'll have time for a Q&A. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and barring any technical difficulties, we hope to upload it to our website. We ask that you please type your questions into the Q&A panel, and we have enabled upvoting. So if there are questions that are more popular, we ask you to upvote. We're just mindful that we do have a lot of people attending the webinar today. So if there are questions that repeat, I won't be taking every single question, but I will refer people to the recording if we've already answered a question. And this is the second webinar that we are hosting about our outreach and applications process. And some of the questions about the program had been answered in our first webinar. And we'll put the link to that in the chat that you can have a look at that recording. And we also have an FAQ page, a frequently asked questions page, which has a lot of information on applying. So there's some responses there that are helpful. And of course, you can always email the program if none of those if your answer, what you're looking for, is not in those places, in the video or the FAQ page. Please include your name when and where you're based with your question. That's helpful for us. And as I said, we will try to take as many questions as possible during the Q&A. So I've already introduced myself. I'm now going to turn to my colleagues to introduce themselves. So Sarah Woolley, please, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the Programme Manager for the Active Fellowship year. Lovely to see you all here. I'm going to pass over to Sarah Camacho-Felix.
Hello everyone. So I am the other Sarah Camacho-Felix, and I am the Programme Lead for the Active Fellowship year, and I also work closely with non-residential fellows on their projects and their sort of track of the program.
Diana, do you want to just say hello?
Hello, I'm Diana. I work in LSE's Graduate Admissions Office, and I work closely with the AFSEE team.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today, Diana. We're really grateful. So next slide, and I think I'm handing it over to you, Sarah. Oh no, I'll talk through this one, sorry. So as a program, our stance regarding inequality is that inequality is not inevitable, and that we can create a better, more equitable world, and that we do this through collective leadership and looking to the future with robust alternatives to the current systems that we have in place. And we believe that equity can be achieved through bold, imaginative action. And these are very much, what the program is about, thinking through the alternatives to the current status quo. And as a program, our aim is to support fellows who are working to bring about change in their home societies, in their home countries. So the applications for this program are done through the LSE's Graduate Admission System. So we'll talk you through that. And we have posted the deadline, and you will need to complete the application form and provide your supporting documents through that system. And we have the link here, and we can also put that in the chat. about where you can find the information on how to apply. And our application deadline for this round of applications is 5 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, on the 12th of January, 2023. And that is a hard deadline. So please ensure that you start working on your applications as early as possible. So next slide, please. So now I will hand over to Sarah.
Thanks very much. So I'm just going to start talking about the actual application process and what you will need. So practically, what you will need to provide to us is you will need to nominate 2 referees. There's some information on our website about what those can be, and I think Diana might talk a little bit more about that too. You'll need to upload your transcripts for any qualifications that you hold, or a document confirming that you don't hold an undergraduate degree if you're applying for our non-residential stream. You will also need to upload your statement of academic purpose and a CV. And you'll also need to take necessary steps to prove that you meet LSE's minimum English language requirements. If you need to take a test to do this, you don't have to have done that by the time you apply, but if you were successful in gaining an offer, you would then have to meet the requirements. So I hope that's clear. I'm going to pass over to Diana now, who's going to talk through each of these parts in more detail.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, hello everyone. I'm glad you could all join us today. My name is Diana, and like I said earlier, I work in LSE's Graduate Admissions Office. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to put together a strong application for the Atlantic Fellows residential and non-residential programs. So here on your screens is an outline of what we'll discuss today. We'll cover how to write a strong statement of academic purpose. I'll explain what a competitive CV should look like. I'll also talk about transcripts, which are particularly important for those of you who might be considering applying for the residential program. And finally, I'll talk to you about how to ensure your references will be of good quality and work well in your favor. Next slide, please. So let's start with the statement of academic purpose. Some of you may already know this as a personal statement, but we at LSE like to refer to this as a statement of academic purpose because we notice that the personal and impersonal statement can sometimes give the wrong idea of what's expected in a strong statement. So it's common for some applicants to assume that their statements should be filled with many personal stories and anecdotes, but it's crucial that applicants understand that selectors are really looking out for strong evidence that points to your academic suitability. And in the case of the AFSEE programs, evidence that your professional experience is actually relevant to AFSEE and matches AFSEE's expectations. There, of course, may be personal elements in your statement, but it's important that you always bring it back to why you're suitable for the program. The first thing to consider is to keep your statement between 1,000 and 1,500 words. Try to be concise and focus mainly on your academic interests and any goals you want to achieve by completing the AFSEE program. Selectors want to see that you've thought carefully about why you're applying to the AFSEE program, and they want to be convinced that both you and the program are actually right for each other. And to do this, you need to be very clear and very sure about the reasons you're applying to the AFSEE program. So before or during the process of writing your statement, it can actually help to quickly jot down 1 to 3 main reasons why you're applying to the AFSEE program, and always keep these reasons in mind when you're writing your statement to remind you, I guess, of why you're writing your statement and why it matters. Selectors also want to see that you can engage with the details of the program, but especially that you can follow the specific guidance for writing your AFSEE statement. What I'm referring to is the statement guidance that will be visible on the application form. For those of you who are applying to the non-residential track, you need to highlight an area of socioeconomic inequality that you currently engage in. You should also give concrete and convincing examples of how you've contributed to projects that seek to address inequalities. Make sure that you explain the nature of the project that you seek to undertake during the fellowship, and be sure that it aligns with at least one of the International Inequalities Institute's research themes. These themes can be found on the III website, but I'll call some of them out now just for your benefit. These themes include the wealth, elites, and tax justice theme, the cities, jobs, and economic change theme, global economies of care, politics of inequality, public economies of inequality. So please keep these in mind as you prepare your statement. Finally, remember to explain the goals you want to achieve within 5 years of completing the AFSEE program. Now, for those of you who are interested in the residential track, you should essentially follow the same guidance, but you also need to do something extra. You need to make sure your statement contains academic reflection. You should explain the academic knowledge that you're trying to gain from the Masters in Inequalities and Social Science, and you should explain your research interests. The selectors want to see that you can think through academic material in a clear and critical manner, because that's what your lecturers would expect of you during the Master's program. Before I move on to what would weaken your statement, I'd just like to talk briefly about the distinction between description and explanation in statements. It's very easy to write a purely descriptive statement where you mention things like, I went to this university and studied the subject, I worked at this company for 5 years, and then I received this award for community work. That's saying something, of course, but it's not really saying much. So explanation in a statement of academic purpose is about elaborating on the significance of professional activities you've done or modules you've studied in relation to the fellowship. So for example, if you have worked in the UN or a local NGO, don't just mention the role and move on. You should demonstrate 1 or 2 learnings from this experience and why you feel it's prepared you for the fellowship, or if you feel the role hasn't actually made you, I guess, maybe it's made you more curious, perhaps, about effecting social change, you can make that clear in your statement and explain that as one of your motivations for pursuing the fellowship. Selectors essentially just want to see critical reflection backed by evidence of enthusiastic engagement. And in the case of the residential track, they want to see that you have thought carefully about your academic objectives and essentially want to capture that well in your statement to make it convincing enough. Now, one way to avoid writing a disappointing statement is to conduct thorough research on the program and read all program pages very carefully to identify the information about the program structure and the courses that will be on offer. You should show that you've read details about the program and modules on offer and can explain why a particular module would be of interest to you. I'd advise that you don't make your statement generic. Almost everyone will write about how much they're interested in addressing inequalities, whether that's gender inequality or tax injustice, but you should highlight what makes you and your professional background stand out. And you can do this by giving examples that are unique to you and your work. Please try not to start your statement with a cliche quotation, whether that's a quotation from Martin Luther King or Desmond Tutu or Mahatma Gandhi. I would also recommend that you don't include excessively personal stories about your life in your statement unless they are very central to your professional work and your motivations for pursuing the AFSEE program. While the selectors don't want to read excessively long statements, they also don't want to read very, very short statements. They want to see that you've put significant effort into writing your statement, so please do follow the word count guide. Please also make sure that you proofread your statement before you submit. If you have a trusted friend or family member who can maybe read through it for you to ensure that it all makes sense, and also try to read your statement multiple times before you submit to ensure there are no spelling or grammatical mistakes. Next slide, please. So the next thing to focus on is CVs. Your CV is actually very important. So alongside the statement, it's what will actually help you really stand out. So please treat the quality of your CVs very seriously. As some of you may already know, the AFSEE program expects suitable candidates to have minimum between 7 to 10 years of professional experience. This means you need to write your CV in a way that clearly captures the length of your professional experience. Don't write long sentences to describe your positions. Keep your CV very concise. Try to use bullet points to describe your role if possible. Your CVs should be about 2 pages maximum. If you can limit it to 1 page, then that is great. Anything longer than 2 pages doesn't really look good. Don't feel you must describe every single aspect of each position in your CV. Remember that the statement offers you the opportunity and the space to elaborate on the nature of your professional experiences. So don't over-explain things in the CV. Ideally, you should aim to tailor your CV to AFSEE's requirements. So if you've done 15 or 20 different jobs in your life so far, you don't necessarily have to include all of them in your CV. You just need to identify the ones that seem the most relevant to AFSEE and place those ones in your CV. And when it comes to disappointing CVs, so one type of disappointing CV is one that includes pictures. Please no pictures of yourself or your cat, even if it may be cute. Pictures can serve as a distraction and are not relevant to your application. So please, please, please avoid including pictures in your CVs. Another type of disappointing CV is one that lists your positions, but it doesn't actually provide the dates or the time that you did those roles. If you don't date your roles, it's going to be very, very difficult for selectors to know how many years you've worked in a particular place and to essentially calculate the length of your professional experience. So you need to remember to provide the dates. This can be in the form of the month and the year. Other aspects of disappointing CVs include disclosing personal characteristics such as your marital status or the number of kids you may have. This isn't information that's ever going to be useful to selectors who are looking for relevant information that points to your suitability for the AFSEE program. And lastly, please try to avoid spelling errors in your CV. Next slide, please. So moving on to transcripts and previous study. If you're applying to the residential track of the AFSEE program, please ensure that your previous degree transcripts are provided. This is important for selectors to use in confirming if you meet the academic requirement of the master's component of the fellowship. When uploading your transcript, please make sure you provide all pages of your transcript to allow selectors to have a very comprehensive view of your academic trajectory. If you don't have previous degrees, you can of course still apply to the AFSEE program, but you may be a more competitive candidate for the non-residential program than the residential. If for any reason at all, you do not have a transcript or don't have a previous degree, please just upload a document when you're filling in the application form that confirms that you don't have any previous degrees and can therefore not provide a transcript. The selectors will understand completely. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to your references. References, like other aspects of the application, are very important. If you're applying to the residential track, you can request one academic reference if you wish to, but if you supply 2 professional references, that's still absolutely fine. So don't worry about that. When selecting your referees, please make very careful decisions. Your referees must know you well enough to write in considerable detail about your suitability for the AFSEE program. If it's an academic referee, this can be an academic tutor or lecturer. They should know about your academic strengths and should be able to speak convincingly about them. If it's a professional referee, it should be someone like a supervisor, line manager, or colleague that you work closely with. And essentially, we would hope that you contact your referees in advance of the application deadline. So please remember that it's solely your responsibility to ensure that they submit the references before the application deadline. If you apply before the application deadline, but your references are submitted past the deadline, your application won't be released for consideration until your references are received and processed. Please also make sure that your chosen referees have seen your application materials beforehand, or at least they understand why you're applying to the AFSEE program. You can send your referees your CV or a copy of your statement to review, because this can actually help them when they're writing a reference for you. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, please do your research on the program before applying. It's important that you understand what each of the fellowship tracks entailed, because if you have a poor understanding of the program, this can actually manifest in your statement, and that's unlikely to work well in your favor. So please do the necessary research. Please also make sure you complete all aspects of the application. Be sure to contact your referees beforehand so they have enough time to write your references. Please know that, again, it's your responsibility to notify them and nudge them to submit the references as early as possible. Regarding your statements, you should proofread them. After you've completed the drafts, check multiple times that the language, grammar, punctuation are all of good quality. Keep it simple, keep it concise, don't add excessive information. With every sentence you're writing, ask yourself if it's relevant and if it serves a purpose within the statement. There's no application fee, so don't worry about payments, but if you apply to one AFSEE program as a first choice and a non-AFSEE program as your second choice, you will be required to pay an application fee of £80. If you feel you don't have enough funds to pay for this, then you can request an application fee waiver. There's a form you'd have to fill to do that. And just a final note, once you have applied, please make sure that you check the graduate applicant portal for information about the progress of your application. You may not receive a decision immediately after your application is released for consideration, but please do check the portal for the progress of your application. And that is it for me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Diana. So I'm just going to run through briefly the timeline that we will be working on in 2023. So our applications will close on the 12th of January, as Diana mentioned. Your references have to be in by the 19th, 1 week later. In March 2023, applicants who have been shortlisted will be invited to interview, and we'll notify you of that. We'll hold the interviews in April 2023. Applicants will be notified of final decisions, and then in June, we will announce the new cohort of fellows on our website and through a press release. Very important reminder, please make sure you've allowed yourself enough time to complete the application, including providing all the required supporting documents. It can take time to get these documents from educational institutions, and many of those are quite likely to be closed over the winter break. So we would advise starting on that process early. If your application isn't complete when applications close, unfortunately, we won't be able to consider that. And then just the final slide from me. If you'd like to speak to us, you can email us, which is afsee@lse.ac.uk anytime. And if it's helpful to have a quick chat via Zoom to talk something through, we're happy to do that. You can connect with us on lots of different social media channels. We have Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we're on Twitter. And if you'd like to hear from us, we have 2 different newsletters, the AFSEE newsletter and the III newsletter. And we have a really busy schedule of events running through the year. So please do have a look at our III event schedule too. I'm going to pass over to Armina now to start the Q&A section.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Diana, for very comprehensive presentation. We've got a few questions around recommendation letters, and you've addressed this in your discussion, saying that it is possible to have 2 professional recommendation letters. So I'm going to consider that question from Alberto, which has been upvoted 8 times, answered. And that's also a question from Margianta about 2 professional references. That's also been answered. A question from Nariman in Egypt. Can you clarify why we need to confirm that we don't have an undergraduate degree? I don't think that was said.
Yeah, so the reason for that is when you're filling in the application form, there is a section where you need to provide your transcript, and you're not really able to proceed if you don't provide your transcript. So you can't submit the application if there's a gap in where the transcript should be. So to fill that gap, you just need to upload a document just saying you don't have a transcript. It just allows you to proceed in the process easily, if that makes sense.
I think they're asking something else. I think there's a confusion that's arisen, that some people think that we're saying you don't require an undergraduate degree for non-residential, and that graduates are ineligible, but that is not the case. Just to clarify very clearly, it is very desirable, in fact, almost required, I would say, to have an undergraduate degree when applying for the residential stream. Only in very specific cases can we make special cases for those on the residential stream. But for the non-residential stream, you are not required to have any degrees. If you have a degree, whether it's an undergraduate degree or a master's degree, that is fine. But we do not require a degree for application to the non-residential stream. Diana, is that something?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So the next question. The question is about references. Are referees supposed to write to LSE directly, or do they send the letters to the applicant and the applicant submits it alongside their application?
So usually how it works is when you're completing your application form, there will be a section for references where you need to nominate 2, at least, or maximum 2 referees. By nominating them, you will have to enter their email addresses, and they will receive an email notification with information about how they can provide the reference. That's usually how it works normally. However, if your referee can't upload the reference onto the system, then there is an option for them to email us directly and provide that reference. The information about this is on the graduate application web pages. So there will be a particular email address, which is graduate.documents, and your referee will essentially just email it to us, and we'll be able to confirm and verify it that way.
Okay, thank you, Diana. So they have to submit it via the LSE portal by receiving this email, or they send it directly by email to LSE. They do not send it to the applicant. Thank you. So that was a question from Lillian from Uganda. A question, is this a fully funded opportunity? Yes, it is. A question from Nazir, same question as Alberto. I've already answered the question about professional references, and Diana as well. This is a question, I think I know the answer, but Diana, I will ask it anyway. It's from Parag. It says, I received my transcript in a sealed envelope. Should I open, scan, and upload it?
Yes, you should definitely scan it, upload it. That will be perfectly fine.
Thank you. This is a question from Lucas in Kenya. And it is a question about, okay, I can't really answer that question without knowing further details. For applying to this program, we require at least a minimum of 7 years. That's the absolute minimum. And if you are currently doing a master's degree, you would, in your application, have to explain why you would want to do another master's degree immediately after. So I do not think that that would necessarily be a strong application to do consecutive master's degrees. Sarah, I can see you want to say something.
Sarah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're reading the one from Lucas, correct?
yes.
Yeah, because you say you're a third-year student, so I'm wondering if you're actually an undergraduate. This is me guessing. At which point I would say you have to have completed your program to apply for the master's, and we don't transfer from residential to then be considered for the apply for non-residential to then be considered for the master's. You can apply to both, but whichever one you're accepted on is the one you do. We don't reserve the scholarship for you later on. I'm assuming, once again, based on what's there in the question.
And another question about not having a transcript. So if you have not completed your studies, you may want to wait a year and then reapply. Now, this is a question I've seen come up a few times about the length of the CV, Diana. Some people are asking about a confirmation if the CV can only be 2 pages and whether they can attach 2 CVs of 2 pages each.
Well, it's ideal for your CV to be 2 pages. Of course, I mean, you might want to have 3 pages, but the main thing here is to make sure your CV is concise. You just have everything in there. You don't have it running, I don't know, 5 or more pages, or even 4 pages. That's just too much. 2 pages maximum is the ideal. So please try your best to stick to that if you can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a question about experience. 5 years of work experience and a 2 years master degree, would that equal the 7 years of experience required? No, that wouldn't. That's a question from Annie in Uganda. Okay, if you applying and you only have 6.5 years experience at time of application, no, that is not going to be a strong application. And that is in response. Okay. If you have a master's degree, this is a question from Anonymous. If you have a master's degree and you also have an undergraduate degree, you can submit both transcripts. And it is right that you should submit both transcripts. If you have a master's degree and you are applying to the residential track, which is another master's, applying for another master's program, which is the residential track, you will need to explain in your statement why you would like to apply for a second master's degree and how it will build on or differ from the master's degree which you hold. Because our program is committed to, widening access. So, if people have master's degree and are applying for another master's degree, we'd like to know why you're applying for a second or, master's degree. A very specific question from Monica. Yes, an academic reference can be an academic colleague. If you only have, this is a question from Socheletzo, sorry for mispronouncing your name. If you have a master's degree but don't have an undergraduate degree, you can explain that in your statement and go ahead and upload the Master of Arts degree. That is absolutely fine. A question from Alias Ger. If automatically disqualified if you have less than 7 years of experience. Yes, we are a very competitive program, and the people who make it onto the program have much more than 7 years of experience. So a 7-year experience is a minimum. So 5 years would not be enough, and we would recommend waiting to apply when you have further experience. A question from Hilka in Namibia. Yes, volunteer work experience does count. It doesn't have to be paid professional experience. And again, you can explain in your statement how that volunteer experience was part of your social change work. So that's important to do. A question from Marcella: should the transcripts be officially translated to English? I believe the answer is yes, but I will ask Diana for confirmation.
Yes, absolutely. Please do translate it to English. If you, ideally, you can translate it yourself when you're uploading your transcript when applying. However, if you are successful and when your documents need to be verified, we will need a copy that was officially translated. So just bear that in mind. When you're applying, you can translate it yourself. That's absolutely fine, but you will need to get an official translation in the end if successful.
Thank you. So does that mean, when you say officially translated, that means a notarized translation?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Diana. A question from Nariman: is it useful to email faculty professors at III or discuss research interests with them? I would say at this stage, without having been made an offer, that would be somewhat premature. But colleagues, Sarah, what do you think?
I agree with you at this point. Because there isn't an offer, it's a bit premature. But so if you are successful and you are made an offer, then yes, absolutely, but only at that stage.
Question from Lillian in Uganda: can you share the link where I can read more about the program themes? Yes, we can share that link. Question from Nariman: what is the balance of time that a fellow spends between academic studies, research work, and other components? I'm assuming, I don't know which stream this is on, so maybe you might want to clarify. Okay, this is a question from Heidi. Question is: I'm a faculty member in Mexico with a PhD. Can I apply to this program? Yes, you can. We do have people with PhDs on the program, but to clarify, the people with PhDs on the program tend to be on the non-residential stream. We have not had anyone with a PhD applying for or undertaking the residential stream because we assume that if you have a PhD, you don't need to do a master's. So that would be highly unusual. Question from Zaim: is there a difference in assessing the residential and non-residential tracks? Diana, can I hand that over to you?
Yes, there is a difference. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there are certain things you will need to address in your statement. So both residential and non-residential candidates will need to answer same questions. However, residential candidates will need to show more evidence of academic suitability for the master's program. So there will need to be evidence of academic reflection, engagement, academic themes. But essentially they're more or less the same. There's just that slight distinction there.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. This next question, Sarah Woolley, I'm going to ask you. This is a question from Sheila from Ghana, who is asking if she needs to take the English proficiency test if English is their native language.
So I think it depends on a few things. Diana might also be able to advise. I think it will depend if you have previous degrees and where those were and what language those were taught in. And I don't know, there's country pages on our graduate admissions site, which would be a good place to start. I know there's a Ghana page. So I would check out that page. I'll try and find the link and put it in the chat for you now.
Thank you.
I'll just add that if you're from an English, a UKVI majority English speaking country, you won't need to take the English language test. But if you are not on that list, you will be required to take the test. My understanding is that being from Ghana is not currently on that list. So there will be that expectation. However, as Sarah said, please do check the information on our web pages about the English language requirements.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a question from Tilvas. Is it okay to apply for both tracks and to allow the selectors to determine which track is more suitable? Diana, what do you think?
Yes, you can apply to both. And of course, the job of the selector is to also determine which program you are suitable for. But I would also advise you to reflect critically on which program you feel you are suitable for and use that judgment in how you apply to the AFSEE programs.
Absolutely. And in the application, you select first choice and second choice. So we will take that into consideration. The selectors will take that into consideration. So if you have put the first track, the residential track as your first choice, and you are made an offer, then that's, you know, indicating to us that that's your preference. So a question from Joseph in Sierra Leone. Can I apply for both residential and non-residential programs at the same time? Yes, you may apply for both residential and non-residential programs at the same time. Okay, a question from Sudarshan. I have a master's from the UK, but I'm working right now in India. Can I apply for the non-residential program? Yes, you can. I have been in Atlas Core. This is a question from Anonymous. I have been in Atlas Core earlier. Does that automatically reduce my chances of being accepted to the residential track? I find it difficult to answer that question because we would need to look at the full application. But as has been mentioned already, we are looking to widen participation and to extend opportunities to individuals who have not had many fellowship opportunities in the past or master's study opportunities. So just bear that in mind. So it's not an automatic reduction of chances or an automatic no, but it is just an indication of what we are as a program trying to select for, and that is to enable individuals who have not had opportunities in the past to have greater chance of opportunities. A question from an anonymous attendee. Are there any deferral options available? We do not recommend deferral options because we select as a cohort. So if you were selected, we would encourage you very strongly to take the opportunity because we would not support deferral. And then you would have to reapply in the subsequent year. And there's no guarantee that if you were made an offer in 1 year, that you would be made an offer in the second year, because we are selecting for not just as individuals, but we are looking at balancing out different countries, different areas of expertise in cohorts. And a follow-up question was, is there a cooling off period or gap when you can reapply? If you are not selected, you can apply the following year, but please bear in mind that you will have had to have further experience to make that application more competitive after having not received an offer. A question from Joaquin in Argentina about the non-residential track. I do not have a printed degree, I'm assuming it's a transcript, to upload. It is in the process of being issued. Okay, Joaquin, if you are currently doing a PhD, and I'm assuming because this is what you've written here, then we would not necessarily recommend that you apply, because it is impossible to do a PhD at the same time as doing the AFSEE program, and particularly if you're doing a binational PhD, which sounds quite complicated, linked to two universities. So While we did say we have had people who are in possession of PhDs, we have not accepted people who are undertaking PhDs at the time of application, because we acknowledge the amount of time required to do the AFSEE fellowship program. Question from Kay, we've already answered that. Yes, you can have one academic reference and one professional. This is a question from Anonymous, and the question is there an academic subject requirement? So this is a very good question. We do not have specific subject requirements. For instance, we have had individuals who have had arts degrees or who have had a degree in engineering. So we are not looking specifically for individuals who have sociology or social science degrees. But it will be important in the statement to explain, particularly if you are applying for the residential track, of your interest in getting a social science, specifically a sociology degree. Diana, do you want to say any more about that?
Yeah, just to add that what you said is absolutely right. It is a very holistic selection process. So we are considering every element of your application, and in your statement, just explain and demonstrate that you are suitable for a social science master's program and are able to meet the, I guess, the expectations of the program. You don't necessarily need to have a particular degree in a social science subject. So yes, all Amir said is correct.
Thank you. A question from Asia in Trinidad and Tobago. If you are planning on continuing with a full-time professional job while undertaking the AFSEE program, then the only track you can undertake is the residential track. You will not be non-residential track, sorry. You will not be able to undertake the AFSEE residential program and hold a full-time professional job, because the residential track involves full-time master's study, which is very, very intense at the LSE. A question from Professor Hamill, can you clarify the, can you outline the content of the AFSEE modules? This was something we answered in the other webinar. So, and I'm mindful that we have 96 questions. So in order to get through all of the questions, and because that was gone into in great detail in the other webinar, I will ask that you please refer to the other webinar to see what the content of the AFSEE modules are. Thank you. Okay, Sarah Woolley, can you answer this question about family support that we provide?
Yeah, sure. So we do provide family support for fellows on both streams. It is available, dependent on if you do need that or not. For non-residential fellows, this can cover costs to do with arranging care for your children while you're away in London at the intensive modules with us. So we can cover, or we can assist certainly with covering the costs of childcare while you're in our modules. And for residential fellows, if you choose to bring your children to London, we do have different amounts depending on whether you will be in a kind of single parent or two-parent household and how many children you bring with you. It's usually a couple of £100 a month per child to help you with covering those costs. And if you choose to come to the UK but your children remain in your home country, we haven't had too many like that before, but that's certainly something we can discuss with you. So if you were successful in getting an offer, we can certainly discuss this with you and find out what would be most appropriate.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm looking at the most upvotes. So this is a question about the English requirement. It says, what is considered necessary steps to show we meet the LSE English language requirement? As Sarah Woolley already mentioned, please look on the graduate application pages for the country you're applying from, and that will indicate what you need to show in order to meet the English language requirements. And colleagues, if there's anything that you want to add to what I'm saying, please just unmute yourself and say. Okay, it's a question from Jose. If I apply to the program this year and I'm not selected, could I apply next year with the same references? I'm assuming, Diana, that that's possible.
If you apply for the program this year and you have provided 2 of the references, and if you are not successful and you want to apply again the next year, we retain your references on our system, so you don't need to provide references again for the application in the following year. So no need to worry about the references if you're reinstating your application.
So thank you very much. Question from Joseph Bangura. I've already answered that about a master's degree. A question from June about funding for students with families. We've answered that. Camilla. Okay, we've already answered the question from Camilla about having a degree and, upload whatever transcripts you do have. So if you have an undergraduate degree, please upload that as well. This is a question about the fully funded. So fully funded means that your fees are paid, and for the non-residential track, we do not provide a stipend. We provide £10,000 for the project. For the residential track, who undertake the MSc in Inequalities and Social Science, we also provide a stipend, a living stipend. Sarah Woolley, would you like to say anything about that further from what I've added?
No, just for non-residential fellows, we do try to cover all costs that you would incur associated with travelling to and from London. We cover travel and accommodation and things like that. So you shouldn't be out of pocket for attending the modules.
And we pay for the visa costs for all applicants. Yeah. So could you clarify at which point in the application process will the referees be notified by the system? Is it at the point of formal submission of the complete application?
So how it works is on the application form, the tab for the references, when you put your referee's email address onto the system, if you were to click on save and continue or proceed, if you were to proceed from that page, the emails would be instantly sent to your referees. However, if you don't want the emails to go to your referees at that time, all you have to do is just save the information and don't proceed to the next page. So essentially, it depends on when you want the email notifications to go out to your referees. If you still need some time to ask them or get a response from them, don't click proceed, because that would send the emails to them. So it's up to you basically. And essentially, if you do click submit on your application form, the email notifications would go out anyway.
Thank you very much, Diana. This is a question from Innocent in Uganda. How inclusive is this program in terms of regional balance in admissions, and how many successful candidates do you consider on average per year? So we accept a total of 18 fellows each year, 9 in the residential stream and 9 in the non-residential stream. And we try to be as inclusive as possible in terms of regional balance.
Yeah, I would say we're very inclusive. And we do tend to have representation across the globe in every cohort.
Thank you, Sarah. So this is a question from Rawia from Sudan. Can we get a conditional offer if a test result is not submitted with the application? So English language test result is not submitted with the application.
Yes, you can. So you don't need to provide your English language test scores at the time of making your application. You'd only be required if you are successful and you need to meet the conditions of your offer. That's when you need to provide your score. So you don't need to do the test before you apply. That's totally fine.
And we do reimburse for those who have an offer, only for those who have an offer and who take the English language. We will reimburse you for the costs of the English language exam, but only if you have an offer, to emphasize that. Can a dependent child and my spouse accompany me if successfully selected? Yes, we've already answered that question. Okay, this is a question from Elena from Scotland. How can we best evidence the experience requirement? Through the CV and academic statement? Yes, so both through the CV and the academic statement, you evidence your experience. You can list it on the CV, and then you can write about it, providing more details about that in the statement. How competitive is the program? I would say it's very competitive because we are only offering 18 slots, and so it is competitive. And we have, I don't want to give a specific number, but we have several hundred applicants per year, and each year it grows. So yeah. So this is a question about English language, and we've already answered it. If you could look at the Ghana and Nigeria pages, John Peter, and see what the requirements are, because you will be given specific information about the English language requirements from the country you're applying, as both Sarah Woolley and Diana mentioned. A question from Dawn in the US, is the stated preference for applicants from the South definitive? Or is there a history in the program of accepting fellows from the US, the North, if one's work is consistent with the III themes? So we have accepted, we have fellows from Europe and North America, and we do accept fellows from around the globe. We do, however, try to give opportunities to individuals from the Global South where possible. Sarah, do you want to add anything? I can see you nodding, that's why.
It was just pure agreement, exactly.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a question. If a referee does not have a professional email, can they use a personal email?
Yes, they can. We will just need to do certain checks to just confirm that they are who they are. So that's fine if they don't have a professional or institutional email address.
Thank you. That's a good question. Anonymous attendee, if you're 18, wait a few more years before you apply. Because unless you can meet the 7-year work experience, that would be a non-competitive application. But I do admire your ambition. So this is about band score that we require for submitting IELTS scores.
Diana posted a link in the chat to the English language requirements page for LSE, and that has all of that information on. So I think have a look on there and see what applies to you. It's got the UKVI list Diana was talking about. It's also got all the different qualifications. So just have a look on there, and you should be able to find out. It will be the graduate level one that you want to have a look at.
Thank you. So this is a question, which is a good question. It says, if I apply to the residential program, but I don't get selected, can I still get an offer on the MSc Inequalities and Social Science? So Diana, how would you answer that?
So you wouldn't get an offer on the MSc unless you select the MSc as a separate program choice. So how it works is because you're eligible for 2 program choices when you make an application to LSE, I would recommend you apply to the AFSEE residential if that's your choice, or the non-residential as the first choice, and then you select the Masters in Inequalities and Social Science as your second program choice. So if you are unsuccessful for either of the AFSEE programs, then your application for the master's program would be considered.
Thank you. Okay. This is a question. If for the non-residential track, it's from Lisa in Amsterdam. If you have a degree, it would help to provide transcripts, or does it not? Oh gosh, what happened to that question? Or does it not make a difference? I'd rather avoid having to get my transcripts sent to me if it's not needed at all. I'm not sure how to answer that.
So is this the residential program?
Non-residential.
Oh no, that's fine. You don't need to provide a transcript for your non-residential application. What's most critical is to have it for the residential program because of the academic requirement. However, if you're applying for the non-residential program, that won't be required at the point of applying or at all. So please don't worry about that.
Thank you. So this is a question from an anonymous attendee. The website and presentation says experience, but you are mentioning work experience as a requirement. Does that mean personal project outside of employment? Volunteering does not count? No, that also counts. I think we're just using work experience or experience as interchangeable in this context. It does not have to be paid professional experience. Okay. So a question from Gulam about the duration of the non-residential fellowship program. Is it all virtual or mixed in person and virtual, and where? So for both the residential and the non-residential fellowship programs, in the active fellowship year, it's 1 year. It begins in September with the first module, and then it ends with the submission of the project, which is a year later. Now, there are 5 weeks of module work, and most are in person. We have kept a virtual module in place, both in being mindful of our carbon footprint, but also about the how it's difficult for non-residential fellows to travel. When it is residential and in person, it will be held in London at the LSE. And we are updating the dates on our website, and you can see what dates the module weeks will be. So this is a question from Darlene, whether the AFSEE fellowship program allows for concurrent engagement with LSE's Marshall Institute as a non-residential fellow. So I find it difficult to answer that question because, you know, you can, if you're a non-residential fellow, certainly write to them and reach out to them and attend any public events, but I don't know what concurrent engagement beyond that would entail, because obviously they have their own programs, their own master's degrees, and you know, we would not be able to give you access to those. So it would depend on what you understood as concurrent engagement. And as a non-residential fellow, you would only be in London for a few weeks during your active fellowship year. So this is a question from Sergio from Colombia. I've accessed some scholarships for my master's degree and a fellowship for academic purposes. I would like to ask if this influences negatively in my application. So again, you know, it depends, but we are looking to widen participation. So please bear in mind that if you've had lots of opportunities, we take that into consideration. So there's a question from June. Can you please give more insight on the types of projects we are looking for? Is there a preference for where the project is based? For example, is a project more likely to be considered if it is based in the Global South, or can it be based in the UK or the US? Sarah Camacho Felix, can you take that question?
Sure. So the project, if you're looking at the non-residential projects, which is what I'm assuming you're talking about, they should be based wherever you work, because the idea is that they're meant to be projects that influence practice and influence how we address inequalities. So if you're currently based in the US or the United Kingdom and you're working on addressing inequalities in that space, then that's where the project should be based. And we don't have a preference, in terms of geographic location of where the project happens. It's more along the lines of, more broadly, what is the project about? How does it link to inequalities and the overall mission of the AFSEE program?
A question of clarification about consecutive masters. So if a person is in a master's that ends this year and they're applying for another master's, then that would need to be explained. If you had a master's degree from many years ago, again, you would still need to explain that. But again, we're not necessarily ruling you out, but you need to explain why, if you already possess a master's degree, why you are applying for the residential stream to get another master's degree. So it's a question from Kate. If one has gotten a scholarship 10 years ago, again, same answer. We take it into context, and you will need to explain, and if you have gotten it a previous Okay, a question about CV length. Please put only one CV and be as concise. And if you have a substantial experience, but as Diana said, you don't have to put every single job into the CV. Put those jobs that are the most relevant, or put them concisely, giving more space to those that are more relevant. We don't give, oh, okay, this is a question about feedback, final feedback to successful candidates. Sarah Woolley, I think you said April was when.
Yeah, you'll find out in April. If you were shortlisted and interviewed, you would find out the decision in April.
Okay, Temidayo, about your question, I think I've already answered that about having other master's programs. For Justine from Mexico, how many times can you apply? As many as you want. But I think we will remember you after a while. So if you're not getting selected after maybe 3 tries, maybe this is a sign. From Miriam from Pakistan, do we need to justify why we cannot go for a full-time degree? So we are accepting fellows only on a full-time degree because of cohort, team building. So that is something that we do take into consideration. We have made very, very few exceptions for part-time degree, but we do prefer those who do this, the residential, as a full-time degree. Question from Sheleto, artistic experience. Yes, artistic experience does certainly count, and a proven track record of publishing. So if you have artistic experience and publishing experience, yes, those do count. Absolutely. Yes. Question from Rachel. Can the 7-year minimum be accrued simultaneously? I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, it has to be 7 years before you
7 years.
apply.
It's not 7 jobs or 7 years of, it's 7 years. Like, so yeah, if you happen to be working for 2 organizations at the same time, it's still 1 year of working in social change.
So question from Marelli from Namibia. I previously had a fellowship in global health. Does that disqualify me? If Marelli, it was an Atlantic Fellows program in global health, then yes, I'm afraid that would disqualify you because, you know, if you've already had access to the Atlantic Fellows fellowship, then you are already a lifelong global fellow. So that would disqualify you. I'm reading the questions. Sorry, I'm just taking a little bit of time to see which ones we've already answered about experience and master's programs. That for the English language, please check the link that Diana put in the chat. So this is a question from Julia from South Africa. If the residential track is a master's degree, is the non-residential track not considered a master's degree, but also a year-long fellowship program? Yes, that is accurate. The non-residential track does not result in the issuance of an MSc award. At present, we are attempting to get the non-residential track accredited, but at present, the non-residential track does not issue any diploma, degree, or certificate. It is only the residential track that issues a master's degree. So, Sarah Woolley, if you could take this question, can you please say what things are covered by this scholarship?
Yeah, sure. So it depends which stream you are applying for. If you are applying for the residential stream, the scholarship, we cover the fee for the program, the full fee, and we also give a stipend. So this would be paid termly, and it would be an amount that covers your living costs, which would need to cover accommodation, food, living costs, transport, etc., etc. So that's that. If it's the non-residential stream, we cover all costs associated with attending the module so that we don't leave you out of pocket. And there's no currently program fees attached to that stream. If you're applying for that program only, you won't need to pay an application fee.
Thank you. Okay, looking, and yeah, no application fee. 15 years of experience is eligible for non-residential track and residential track. Yes. I have 10 years of work experience, but I do not have a bachelor's degree. Can I qualify for the non-residential track? Yes. So this is a question about the LSE English language requirement. The LSE website states that you should have an overall TOEFL score of 100. Would 96 be enough? I don't think there's any easing of those requirements if they are published by the LSE. Colleagues, am I correct in that?
If you just focus on the, I believe the entry, the scores we required are the standard scores. If you just focus on the total scores for that, if you don't meet the minimum scores, then we can, I guess, consider possibly allowing you to still meet your condition, depending on why you haven't met those scores or the extent to which you haven't met those scores. But the aim should be to try and meet those scores. But if you don't, then we can, I guess, discuss further on how we can help you.
Thank you. This question from an anonymous attendee: in the non-residential track, is there a possibility to achieve a master's degree at a later point at the LSE? Only if you apply separately through the graduate admissions program and are given entry, but AFSEE would not fund that. So you cannot at one point get a non-residential degree and then apply for a residential degree for a master's program. We wouldn't fund that. How much stipend is given to the residential fellows? Question from an anonymous attendee.
As so for the living expenses, currently it's £19,000 a year. We do review that. We're aware that costs are rising at the moment, so that is something we keep under review.
Thank you. Okay. So the question of, do we need to justify why we are opting for the non-residential program and why we can't go for full-time? If you're applying for the non-residential stream, you should, for whichever stream you are applying for, this is a question from Mariam, you need to explain your interest in that stream. A question from anonymous attendee, does working for a multilateral institution such as the World Bank, which is already working on addressing inequalities, disadvantage you in any way? No, it doesn't. Does the project funding for the non-residential track occur via a separate application process? No, that is, once you are on the non-residential track, you have access to the up to £10,000 of project support. This is a question. I have a pending application to the law department. Is it possible to move the application files to the program? No, you would need to separately apply to the AFSEE program and write a separate statement, because that you couldn't just transfer your offer from the law department to this. Is there a form to explain my current project? That is going to be the statement. That is where you explain your current project and the project that you want to do on the AFSEE program. Question from Valentina. Yes, you have, if you have 7+ years of experience, and then that you would be eligible. And the question about whether you've been living in Bristol for the past 4 years, but you are from Chile, would I have to prove my English anyways?
It depends on a few factors again, so I would just suggest looking at the English language requirements page. Everyone's background is different, their education is different, so you need to have a look and see what applies to you.
And Valentina, we also have a fellow who is from Chile and living in Bristol. I wonder if you know them. Sorry. Question, I have a master's degree. Can I submit the transcript only for that because my undergraduate transcript has some failing grades? Diana, I think in this instance, the 4.0 GPA for the master's would override the undergraduate. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, your master's degree overrides your undergraduate degree. If, for example, you haven't met the minimum undergraduate mark and you have a master's degree, that alone, by just having the master's degree, overrides your bachelor's. However, if on your application form you note that you have a bachelor's degree and you provide only your master's transcript, if you are successful, we will still need to see that you have a bachelor's degree if you put that on your application form. It's just to check. But yes.
Thank you. A question, it keeps moving. It's so difficult to keep track of this. So question from Timo from Ghana, is it vital for an applicant to add his publications in the CV if they have any? I would say if the publications are relevant to the AFSEE program and what you're applying and putting into your statement, then yes, include those publications, certainly. So question from Cyril, if the current PhD program in which I'm enrolled allows for students to partake in other programs and fellowships from accredited institutions, can I still apply for the non-residential track? This is a tricky question. Sarah, what do you think?
Okay. The reason why up until this point we have not accepted any fellows who are currently on a PhD program, we have had applicants and we have not accepted them, is because the project work is a piece of substantial research that would take you away from your doctorate when you're also conducting research. Therefore, we don't view the two as compatible, even if the institution you're doing your doctorate from is open to you having other fellowships. It's specifically about the project you have to take on and the recognition that that is an additional research project when a doctorate is already a full-time research project. That doesn't mean you wouldn't be accepted, but realistically speaking, we haven't accepted up until this point for that reason.
Okay, a question about the stipend for people in the non-residential track, allow them to use the funds in the country where they are based. It's from an anonymous attendee. To continue to live and study, or do the funds need to be spent only if directly related to the fellowship? So just to clarify that we do not provide a living stipend for those on the non-residential track. The stipend is only for those on the residential track. On the non-residential track, we do cover your expenses to travel to London, to get your visa, to reimburse you for costs related to travel and your application fees, but we are not providing living stipend for those on the non-residential track. So the funding you receive is only for the project work.
And the project work is specifically for the funding of the project in terms of being able to conduct the work. It does not include a salary.
This is an important question. How inclusive is the program for deaf or blind applicants? So at the LSE, we seek to be very inclusive, and because we are based at the LSE, we are supported by the team, the disability and well-being team. So we would encourage applicants with disabilities to consider applying, and we do put in place support via the LSE to support those applicants should their applications be successful. Anything to add, colleagues? I'm mindful of the time, so I'm only going to take the questions that are very new. What should be the nature of the project? Do we have to implement it within 1 year fellowship, or can it go below? Okay, yes, you do need to submit it by the 1 year fellowship. There is no possibility of extending it beyond that time. And what should be the nature, Sarah Camacho Felix?
So these projects should be about addressing social and or economic inequalities within the particular context that you work, recognizing that those are really broad. So, I mean, when we talk about social and economic equity, it can address all sorts of issues from education to electricity access to specific human rights to issues of global care. I mean, you can see how wide it is. But it needs to be something that addresses that, usually in the form of a piece of research. So working with a community to find out certain things that then attempt to address the issue. So very action researchy in that point. The output can be any form. We're very open to different types of output because we want the output to speak to the right audience. So this can be podcasts if your audience is a general audience and you're trying to build awareness. This can be reports if your audience is potentially a government or to influence policy. Your output could be a website, an interactive website. It should always speak to a particular audience. So we're not keen on it having to be a specific like academic style report. It can be any form of output, but it needs to be addressing social and economic inequalities.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. And we are down to the last couple of minutes. I have a question from Shwagi from Sudan. Just wanted to check, will there be any opportunity to engage with the other fellows, residential and non-residential, around the projects that they're leading on the local level? Sarah, do you want to quickly take that one?
Yes, there is a chance to engage with them. We have you presenting what you're doing. We encourage you to talk to each other and share ideas. So during the modules, we do have spaces for these dialogues. So even though everybody does their own project, we want it to be dialogic in terms of informing each other, because you all have way more knowledge than we have ourselves. We're not the only knowledge holders. So yes, we encourage that sort of engagement.
Thank you. So we are at the end of time. I see a few more questions, but I think most of those that remain there are questions that have already been answered. So I would encourage those whose questions, I'm not taking at present, whose questions still remain in the Q&A. I've read through them. They have been answered in the recording previously. And if not in this recording, in the other recording. Moreover, we have also provided a very comprehensive frequently asked questions page. So I would turn to Sarah Woolley, to take us further from here about how people can get in touch, and just to re-emphasize that we are available to answer questions by email as well.
Yes, please do feel free to email us. It's just afsee@lse.ac.uk. I'm happy to help you, signpost you to anything that you missed or any questions that you've got. Similarly, if your question is very specific about something to do with the application, you might want to speak to the graduate admissions team. You can just type in contact LSE Graduate Admissions to Google, and that will bring you to the right page. But again, I'm happy to signpost you there. Yeah, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and Diana. And thank you to everyone in the audience for participating and sharing questions. Sorry, we haven't been able to answer all of the questions, but I think we've answered almost all of them. And I'm grateful for your interest in this program. Please visit our web pages for further questions, for further information, and we welcome your applications in due course. Thank you very much.